Evan O'Hara, O-H-A-R-A. I'm a lieutenant with the Massachusetts State Police, just over 22 years.
How long have you held the rank of lieutenant?
4.5 years. I'm the team commander for the State Police Special Emergency Response Team, also known as SERT. 61 team members, 4 of which are full-time, including myself. The other 57 have other primary assignments, and SERT is an additional duty for them. Is the primary search and rescue team for the state police. We conduct lost missing person searches, evidence searches. We do security or crowd control at large events such as the 4th of July, the Boston Marathon, Gillette Stadium, dignitary security.
How long have you been assigned to that?
Since 2014.
Were you working with that unit on January 29, 2020?
So was, sir.
Contacted by Lieutenant Brian Tully.
2:32 p.m., Lieutenant Lee gave me a phone call. He's the supervisor for the Norfolk County State Police Detective Unit. Normally we'll receive a courtesy phone call, which is received from Lieutenant Tully, seeing if we were available. I told him we would be available. He then has to submit a request through his chain of command, which is the Division of Investigative Services. I also have to submit a request up my chain of command, which is Field Services, to get approval by the Special Operations Commander, which is a major. And depending on the request, it may even go above his level to the Lieutenant Colonel who is in charge of the Division of Field Services.
An initial call that you received about 2:32 in the afternoon, how would you characterize that?
It was more of a courtesy notification just to make sure we weren't on another assignment. Weather issue that day, making sure members could respond to the scene.
What kind of weather?
It was a blizzard. I think most areas had received between 18 to 20 inches of snow. He said they were conducting a death investigation. He was looking for assistance with an evidence search. I told him we would have members that would be able to respond and that I would start working on the approval process. I had large snow drifts at the end of my driveway. I told him building a roster and having members clear their driveway at least an hour plus on a response time. After I'd cleared my driveway, I spoke to my captain and said we were cleared on our end. I was getting nervous that my driveway was cleared. The town plow was going to come back. So I'm not sure who called who, but I told him we were cleared through the Division of Field Services. He told me that we were cleared on his end. He sent out an alert to our team at 3:48 telling them that we were authorized to respond. We're geographically dispersed across the state, so we have an East team, West team. I had reached out to a supervisor from the West team. He sent out an alert to the team at 2:53 requesting an availability list. I told him to just confirm that the people responding either had a truck or some kind of four-wheel drive vehicle. Lieutenant Tully told us that we were going to 34 Fairview Road in Canton. The alert went out authorizing the team responding at 3:48. I got the exact address via text from Lieutenant Tully at 4:10. We sent out another alert message at 4:17, just reminding people to bring shovels, brooms, rakes, etc. I left my house at 4:13 and I got on scene at 4:56, so it took me 43 minutes to drive there. Initially, we dispatched 8 members, including myself. Only 7 of us made it to the scene. One of the members could not get off his street. So we only had 7, which kind of shifts some of the dynamics of how we ran the search.
When you first arrived on scene, anyone else preceded your arrival?
This search, Trooper Jay Boussolet was on scene. I believe he arrived 2 minutes prior to my arrival. Trooper Jason Boussolet, it's Beausoleil. Boussolet was just north of the driveway. I parked almost at the end of the driveway, facing away from the flagpole originally. Eventually, we moved Trooper Boussolet's vehicle back towards the flagpole. We wanted some extra headlights to light up the scene.
Lieutenant Tully, was he on scene when you arrived?
He was not.
At some point, did you reach out?
Yes, I gave him a call. He stated he was just leaving Canton PD, would be on scene in about 5 minutes. That was probably around 5 o'clock. We didn't see anyone outside the houses. Resident of 34 Fairview exited briefly after we were first on scene. That was the only person we saw. If you look at the house, there's 2 front doors, one closer to the garage, which would maybe be a mudroom or a den. Adult male exited from that door in a hooded sweatshirt on. He asked us if we were here for what had happened earlier. We said yes, and he walked back inside.
As far as the roadway conditions,
Plow really only cleared center of the road. There was a good 3 to 4 foot snow drift coming off each side of the road. So maybe enough for 2 vehicles to pass, but not cleared curb to curb.
and as far as Lieutenant Tully arriving on scene around 5, what kind of thing? Where did he be correct?
He had instructed us that the death investigation involved a motor vehicle. He told us where the motor vehicle was believed to have been parked and wanted us to search from that area south towards the flagpole fire hydrant.
What if any experience you have doing any type of searching?
In blizzard conditions, we've really never done evidence searches like this. We've done missing person searches, but for evidence searches, nothing like this. Scene could be secured. We really wouldn't respond in a situation like this unless we really needed to.
Search that your team does, typical or non-typical, to search an area that's already been gone over by another agency?
We're a stage 2 response, so pretty much every search we've ever done has been previously searched. We're never really the first persons to search an area. I think our training is a lot different than the regular patrolman or trooper responding. There's not much training provided anymore in the academies, so we do extensive training through a lot of the search and rescue groups that we're a part of, which would be the National Association for Search and Rescue, which is NASAR. We do search and rescue initial actions. We do line searching, managing lost person incidents. We do multiple trainings a month with a team. Looking back to even my time before I was a member of SERT, a search would be, you go this way, I'll go that way. There was really no methodical approach to the search. Gridded off or marked off the area Lieutenant Tully thought would be the best area for us to search. So we had a starting point and an end point. Once all the members got on scene, we set up a line search, or what we would call a grid search, which would just be a slow, methodical search with all of us working in unison, moving through the area.
About how big an area issues was set up?
It was just over 50 feet, I believe, from the front door, which is the left door, looking at the house from the street, to the fire hydrant. I believe it was 59 feet. That is length.
As far as the length of the area, search
3 to 4 feet was the snowdrift coming off the curb.
as far as the information that you received prior to conducting the search, it was things that you might be looking for.
Lieutenant Tully had informed us that the victim, in this case, was struck by a vehicle. He believed there would be broken pieces of taillight in the area. He also stated the victim was missing his sneaker. So he asked us to search both of those items.
At some point, did you ask Lieutenant Tully any questions about the vehicle in question or anything related to that?
After we found the pieces of the taillight, I asked him if we knew how much damage was to the taillight, or if he had a photo that we could get of the taillight.
And what kind of thing did he tell?
He told us at that time the vehicle was being towed back to Canton PD, so he did not have a photo to show us.
And at any point, did he make any reference to who was involved with the tow at Canton PD?
He said Sergeant Buchanan and Trooper Proctor were following the vehicle back to Canton PD. We moved Trooper Boussolet's vehicle to face the scene to give us some extra lighting for the scene. All the team members also put on a headlamp, which would be like a hiking headlamp. We had shovels, rakes, smaller garden rakes, just to kind of help us sift through the snow, small push broom to move the snow around. It was poor lighting. There really wasn't much street lighting, but with the headlamps, we had decent visibility.
When you first arrived at scene about 4:53 p.m., it was dark out there.
Yes, it was, sir.
It remained dark while you were still on scene.
Yes.
Something much overhead lighting in that area.
Nothing that really helped the search. We started almost directly across from the front door and moved south towards Chapman Street, towards the fire hydrant.
The area that you were searching, where was your focus?
Our right flank was on the curb, and then we moved out across the street from there. So we were lined almost shoulder to shoulder as we moved.
You're primarily searching along the roadway, is that correct?
Correct, sir. As one of the members who was working along the curb, he started to clear some of the grass on the front lawn.
What any issues?
Very difficult to clear the snow. I don't think we had very good visibility on what we were moving, even with the push broom and the rake. It was very difficult to definitively say we'd cleared the lawn properly. So we didn't focus too much of our efforts on that area.
That had some impact as far as documentation of the scene, is that correct?
Correct. Normally on a search, if I'm overall as a team leader, I would run what you would consider a command post or SERT. I would stay behind the line and document our efforts, but because this was such a small search area, it wasn't really an issue because they weren't breaking people off into teams. No one was out of my sight line, and we had multiple detectives on scene that were able to fill that role for me.
As far as the 7 members that you're doing a petition to see if anyone else,
I believe there was 5 other members. I believe there were only 2 that I recognized from the state police, so I'm not sure who the other 3, if they were Canton detectives or Canton patrolmen, but they were all dressed in plain clothes.
And as far as documentation, what if anything was done with records?
As we began to find evidence, I spoke to Lieutenant Tully and just confirmed that he was going to document everything we were recovering via photograph and evidence log.
As far as documenting photos taken by Lieutenant Tully.
Yes. As soon as we found anything deemed as evidence, we stopped our search efforts until they were documented by Lieutenant Tully. I found multiple pieces of red and clear taillight. They were on the street in between the flagpole and the fire hydrant.
You know approximately how many pieces of the
I believe maybe 6 or 7 pieces. There was 3 larger pieces, 2 red, 1 clear, and then a couple of smaller pieces. We found a sneaker. It was same location in between the flagpole and the fire hydrant. He flushed up against the curb and it was upside down. I think we had found 1 piece of taillight prior to the sneaker, and then after we found the sneaker, we found additional pieces of taillight. Close to the curb, as we started digging originally, the snowpack was pretty solid from where the plow had cleared. So once we were able to move through that, we started getting into fresh, undisturbed snow, started moving through that, which was a lot easier to move it. And all the items we found were close to the curb. They were all found at ground level.
The area that's unfortunately middle of the road. How would you characterize that snow, observing footprints, tire tracks, or anything in that area where you didn't find anything?
No, we did not see anything, sir. Like I said, it was all fresh, undisturbed snow once we got past where the plow had cleared up to.
As far as this search, just some sort of line that's set up, is that correct?
Correct. We had a right flank on the curb closest to the house, and then we moved left into the street. As we dug the snow out, it was originally inspected as they would pull their shovel out, make sure they didn't have anything in the shovel, and they would bring it out to the street. I was the left flank. They would dump it in the street, and I would sift through it at the end. Once I was positive nothing was in that snow, I would toss it onto the other side of the street. And we just continued that process as we moved south through that grid.
Yeah.
I would say that was probably about a 3+ foot in height. But as we moved into the snow itself, getting closer to the curb, I was in level with the rest of the area. What was on the front lawn, which was on the neighbor's lawn. So probably 8, maybe 18 inches of snow.
How long a period of time was it live scene as far as searching, and how long process did that?
After Lieutenant Tully showed up, kind of informed us where we were going to search, we moved Trooper Bousselet's vehicle at 5:20, and the rest of the team started to show up around 5:21, 5:24. A couple other members with extended response time showed up a little bit after that, but all members were on scene by 5:41. We had already started the process before they had all arrived on scene, and we were complete by 6:15. We started to wrap up and clear the area.
As far as the wrapping up, how was that considered?
Found the sneaker and a couple additional pieces of taillight. We moved south for, I'd say, over 5 feet, maybe closer to 8 to 10 feet without finding any other pieces of evidence. Lieutenant Tully and I had a conversation. He was very satisfied that we had found everything we were going to locate, and we decided to suspend the search. I told Lieutenant Tully, we'll do a debrief at the end. We'll go over probability of detection, how I feel, whether we found everything that was there. I told him that there was a good chance we did not find everything. I said if you want us to come back in the daylight, which give us better lighting, or after a couple of days, the weather was supposed to warm up. If you wanted us to come back after some snow melt, just to reach out to me, and we would come back.
As far as spending the search at that point, was that something that your decision?
No, that was in consultation with Lieutenant Tully.
You mentioned troopers, you can't be proper. You received information that they were following a vehicle to the station. Is that correct?
Correct, sir. Yes, I know both of them, sir. No, they were not on scene. They were not there, no, sir.
As far as the securing of evidence, how was that done?
So we don't recover evidence. We'll stop and halt our search. Sometimes we've been waiting for crime scene to show up for 2 hours before we've continued to search. Once we found the first piece of taillight, again, I conferred with Lieutenant Tully, asked him if he was documenting it. He stated he was. Once we felt comfortable that he had done that properly, we then continued the search.
Once we get that initial parameter as far as where and what you may be looking for from Lieutenant Tully, is Lieutenant Tully directing your search efforts in any way, shape, or form?
He is not.
And is that typical as far as how searching will be conducted?
Correct, yes. Let me run the search the way I deem best.
In addition to photographs, what else was done to the documents?
We had one of our members use a GPS, which we use a Garmin 64ST, and he marked each item we found, which we then upload to a map, which we did that evening. Garmin GPS we use connects to 4 different satellites to give you a best range of your location. There obviously is some range error involved with GPSs, but he was able to stamp 3 pieces of the tail light. But as he was marking those items, because they were in such close proximity, they were almost marking directly on top of each other. So he only marked 3 of them because it was just going to clutter the map.
Those the larger pieces, smaller.
They were the larger pieces, sir.
Yes.
It's the area we searched and some of the evidence that we recovered.
Seek to introduce the next exhibits.
Any objection, Mr. Yannetti?
There's no objection, Your Honor. Thank you.
Jurors, it's very important that we keep our records straight. It will be important for you during the deliberations that we do this. Sometimes it takes a while. We're fortunate we've got such a great court reporter here to take care of this for us. But I caution counsel that maybe you can all work together so that we don't take up any extra time. All right. Do you need those photos back, Mr. Lally?
11, sir. Flagpole in the front of the house. As you move south, this appears to be one of the pieces of taillight that we recovered.
And you're conducting the search when the actual searching process is ongoing. What was the weather doing while you were doing it?
Yes, because of the air conditioning. So you need to speak up really loudly if you don't have a microphone in front of you.
Still snowing, and you can see some of the snowflakes falling here by the flagpole. It was windy, but it really didn't impact how we were searching through the area. You can see right here to the left of the taillight, that is molding of a shovel. So this piece was picked up with one of the team members' shovels, and as they overturned it, you can see the taillight came up as is the markings of the shovel itself.
And the next photograph is
Yeah. So we're going to have to turn the air conditioning off for this. We can't hear you at all.
the issue is I'm trying to move away from the podium.
I understand. So we need to turn the air conditioning off so that we can. Yes.
See the piece of taillight that we recovered, and again, this is returned snow from the shovel, and again, seeing the markings from the shovel from where it was overturned. It gets a couple of inches, but I didn't measure it, sir. So this is the SERT members working through the area as a line through the grid formation. One of the things we stress is making sure you're close enough to each other that you won't miss a piece of evidence. Because this was such a condensed search area, we just had the team members stand almost shoulder to shoulder. A little difficult to see from a distance, but right here, this is the sneaker that we recovered, flush up against the curb.
Yeah, I'm sorry, using the laser.
Up there. And at the sneaker, this is just a closer zoomed in photo. And this would be the curbing right here. Yes, sir. You see the curbing right here. Sneaker was completely buried. It wasn't until we started digging through the snow that we found the sneaker. This is Exhibit 125. Is the photo I have in front of me. This was a clear piece of the taillight, right? A little closer zoomed in version of the clear piece. Different angle of the piece of clear taillight that was recovered. Difficult to see, but there's a piece of clear taillight right here. I can see with the photo in front of me, but I'm not sure if the jurors can see it from that distance, but there is a clear piece of taillight in this location. A piece of clear taillight right in this location. And there's a piece of clear taillight. Again, might be difficult from the distance for the jurors, but it's in this location here. There's a piece of red taillight located on the ground in this location. It's a closer photo of the same piece of taillight right here located on the ground. There's a small piece of taillight, I believe, in this location right here. A small piece of taillight right on the ground right here in this location. This is the mapping system we use to map evidence we recover. Marks showing on the map, they're a little offset, but that falls in the range of error with the handheld GPSs. GPS's typical range of error on a clear day is up to 16 feet. Obviously, we didn't have a clear day. We had atmospheric conditions, cloudy, snowy conditions. GPSs can be affected with their range accuracy by a few different things. One is the satellite geometry, as GPSs connect to 4 different satellites. You also could have signal blockage. Blockage could occur from trees, buildings, bridges. Then you have atmospheric conditions, and then you have the issues with your receiver end, which is actually the handheld GPS. Those would be the 4 main issues and why you may have a little offset on your GPS readings. But again, typically under clear sky conditions would be up to 16 feet. I've listed as the command post, which is where my vehicle was parked. We have the address, which is the house, 34 Fairview. Then as you move further south, you'll see the first red plastic that we recovered, which again was a larger piece of red plastic, kind of stamped on top of each other, but you'll see the sneaker, you'll see a second red piece of plastic, and you'll see the fire hydrant all marked on the map. Changed the layering on the map just to make it a little easier to read, so we just have the sneaker and the fire hydrant listed on the map here. We started closer to almost directly across from the front door. The evidence recovery all happened between the flagpole and the fire hydrant. The search would have begun right in this area, and as we moved south, we started finding pieces of evidence right around here. Going past the fire hydrant, I hadn't found any other pieces of evidence for 10 feet south towards Chapman Street. So down in this location would be where we stopped.
At the point in time, we're on scene, able to look at or see any grass or any damage to the taillight.
I was not.
At the time that you're conducting your search, you weren't aware of how much taillight you might be looking for.
Correct. We did not know how much damage there was.
From your training and experience in relation to conducting these types of searches, are you familiar with a term known as POD?
Correct. So that'd be probability of detection.
And I believe you referenced earlier in your testimony some variables that go into this particular search.
So probability of detection turning into a mathematical formula to make it simpler, give us more of a baseline on how well we did search in the area. Covers 10 different categories. We'll rate those categories 1 through 10 on how we feel we did and kind of come up with a score to give a baseline on what we think percentage-wise we would have found the objects we're looking for. Those categories: terrain, hazards, with lighting, with weather, as you continue on, would be your spacing, where the team members are separated as we're searching, the tactics you're using, the area size, team composition, and then the last one is instinct and variables. And really the last two, I think, is what works best for us. What stands out most about our team is your team composition and the instincts, just for the experience we have.
So was it those variables that led to the conclusion, in conjunction, yourself and Lieutenant Tully, to cease searching at that particular point after you're gone 8 to 10 feet south of the evidentiary items without locating any other evidentiary items?
Correct, sir.
No further questions for this witness. Good morning, Lieutenant.
Morning, sir.
It was Lieutenant Brian Tully who first called you at 2:32 p.m. to ask that your team come out for an evidence search.
That's correct, sir.
You knew at that time that Lieutenant Tully was in charge of the Norfolk County State Police Detectives Unit, correct?
Correct, sir.
Attached to the Norfolk County DA's office.
Correct, sir.
And you also knew Trooper Michael Proctor at that time?
I knew who he is, yes, sir.
You knew that Trooper Michael Proctor was in the same unit as Lieutenant Tully.
I don't know if I knew he was assigned to that office. I'm not sure where he was assigned, sir.
You've since found out that he is.
Correct, sir.
Now, you told Lieutenant Tully during that phone call at 2:32 p.m. that you would make your team available that day, correct?
Yes, sir.
But at that point in time, Lieutenant Tully specifically held you up because he didn't have authorization yet.
It's not.
He told you that he did not have the green light.
He had not requested official response from SERT at that time.
Okay. So you were not authorized to respond at that time?
No, neither one of us are allowed to dispatch my team. We have to send up formal requests to get authorization to respond.
Now, by 2:32 p.m. on January 29th, when you first spoke to Lieutenant Tully, snow had been falling consistently in Canton since the early hours.
I would assume so, yes, sir.
You were aware that John O'Keefe's body was found on Brian Albert's lawn at 6:03 that morning?
I believe when I spoke to Lieutenant Tully, he told me around 6:30.
Snow would have been accumulated from 6:30 a.m. approximately to approximately 2:30 p.m., correct?
Yes, sir.
And so snow had been accumulating at that point when you first got the call for about 8 hours after the body was found.
Correct, sir.
Before you conduct a search, is it important for you to know in general terms the working theory of the police and the investigators in terms of what had happened at the scene?
It's not. I want as detailed information on what we're looking for as far as the investigation's concerned. I'm not interested in those exact specifics. I just want to know where you would like us to search and what you need us to find.
But in order to know what you are seeking to find, you'd need to learn from the investigators what they believed happened that would leave that evidence.
Correct, sir. He told us we were looking for pieces of taillight from a vehicle.
You'd also want to know, prior to getting to the scene, who had access to the scene before you got there.
I did not need to know that information.
Is it important to maintain the integrity of a crime scene before it's searched or processed?
Sometimes when we're involved in searches, we might not be out for days later. If search efforts have been exhausted and they don't think any evidence can be recovered, we will go out to scenes that have been left unsecured for days on end.
My question was, is it important to maintain the integrity of a crime scene before it's searched or processed?
No, you can leave it unattended if you don't believe it'll be disturbed or anything will be taken, sir.
Is it preferable to leave a crime scene unattended prior to searching it?
No, I think they would have searched it before we arrived.
Again, I'm going to ask if you would. Please just
Oh,
respond to my
what
question.
my preference would be, sir, yes, I'd prefer that it was secured.
Okay. That wasn't very difficult.
Apologize.
Objection, Your Honor.
So no comment, Ms. Giannetti.
At the time that Lieutenant Tully first called you, were you aware that no one from law enforcement was controlling that crime scene?
I was not aware of that, no, sir.
Were you aware at that time that no one had been controlling it for about 6 or 7 hours before you were called?
I was not aware of that, sir.
Were you aware that the scene had been abandoned by the police and investigators at about 7:50 in the morning?
I was not aware of that, sir.
Were you aware that the scene was left open to the public for hours before you were asked to search?
I was not aware of that.
When you got there was only one trooper on scene, and that was a trooper from your unit,
Correct, sir.
Beausoleil?
Correct.
Nobody else was guarding the crime scene at that point.
There was not.
At that point, did you know where specifically on the property you were going to be searching?
I did not.
In your experience, is it proper procedure in an investigation that requires a search for law enforcement to give up control of the area that will be searched?
It's not unusual for us to respond to scenes like that, sir.
It happens, but is it proper procedure, sir, to give up control of a area to be searched prior to the search?
If they don't think anything will be recovered in the meantime, it's something we encounter all the time on our searches.
So in this case, is it your testimony then that the investigators didn't think that anything would be recovered?
Objection.
You recorded that there was a second alert regarding this case at 2:53 p.m. You were first notified at 2:32 p.m. by Lieutenant Tully.
That's him calling me. The 253 alert is sent out to my full team. That's me taking the information I received from Lieutenant Tully and sending it out to the rest of my team. They were not aware of the circumstances yet.
So you were the one to send out that alert?
West team supervisor, because I was going to start clearing my driveway. So I reached out to a West team supervisor. He sent out that alert.
And who was that?
That was then Sergeant, now Lieutenant Simpson.
And the alert that Sergeant Simpson sent out was an instruction for members of your team to begin clearing off their cruisers and their driveways to get ready to go, correct?
That was an availability of alert to see who would be available to respond.
And that they should begin clearing off their cruisers and driveways, correct?
Yes, so they would be able to respond.
But your team was still not activated at that point.
Correct.
In fact, Sergeant Simpson wrote in that alert, quote, "We do not have the green light yet," end quote.
Correct, sir.
Sergeant Simpson at 2:53 p.m. in that alert actually typed it in twice that your team did not have the green light.
Correct. It's a voice generator response that will normally duplicate the instructions. So as they listen to it, if they miss it the first time through, they can hopefully hear it clearly the second time through.
It was very clear that you didn't have the green light from that alert.
Correct. So we weren't authorized to respond yet.
You stated that you were in Massachusetts at the time you were first contacted.
Yeah.
How far were you from Canton?
It would be about a 20-minute ride.
With the blizzard conditions, it took you longer?
43 minutes, sir.
You're familiar with the SERT Administrative Journal extract?
The Daily Journal? Yes, sir.
That daily journal recorded the initial contact that you had with Lieutenant Tully at 2:32 p.m.
Yes, that was entered in the Daily Journal.
The 2:53 p.m. alert by Sergeant Simpson is also in the journal.
Yes, it is.
Both of those have a timestamp.
They do, sir.
What is the next entry on that journal?
It says SERT activated en route to Canton.
No time is entered next to that entry.
There is not, no.
The previous alert said only to clear the vehicles and driveways, essentially, right? To check on availability.
Correct, sir.
You have a memory of after that 2:53 p.m. alert sent out by Sergeant Simpson that Lieutenant Tully called you back about an hour later?
It's not a memory, sir. Our alert for the team to respond is time-stamped at 3:48 p.m.
Okay. And that was Sergeant Simpson that recorded that?
Correct, sir.
That's not in the Daily Journal?
No, that's in the Health and Homeland Alert Network, which records all our alerts that get sent out. And that was time-stamped at 3:48.
You're talking about 348 being the alert authorizing you to depart. Sometime before 4, Sergeant Simpson informed your team to start heading to Canton and to report to you, correct?
Correct, sir.
That meant that team members should basically stop what they're doing, the ones who are going to be going, get their gear ready, suit up, get in a car, and start driving to Canton to meet up with you. The 7 members of your team who did show up were Bearden, Beausoleil, Carrier, Louise, O'Brien, you, and Viscardi.
Correct, sir. A pretty significant difference between arrival times. We use our geotab, which is our vehicle locator, to determine arrival times.
Is your testimony that the personnel status report does not record the date and time that somebody arrived on scene?
No, that's all manually entered, sir.
Because that has you two showing up first.
Yes, sir. Bearden arrived at 5:21. Sergeant Luis and Sergeant O'Brien arrived at 5:24. Trooper Viscardi showed up at 5:34. Sergeant Carrier showed up at 5:41.
How your team was all there.
Yes, sir.
So is it your testimony that you did not meet up as a team somewhere and head to 34 Fairview? You all arrived individually.
That's correct, sir.
Did every single trooper who arrived have their own cruiser?
Yes, they did, sir.
And Lieutenant Tully first contacted you at 2:32 p.m. It was still daytime.
Yes, it was.
So it was light out.
Yes, sir.
At around 5 o'clock on this late January day in Massachusetts, it was dark out by the time you got.
Yes, it was.
So when you finally arrived on scene after the team getting the green light, it was dark for the start of your search.
Yes, it was.
When you got there, you set up a command post.
Well, you could call my cruiser command post, sure, sir.
Well, I didn't use the term command post, sir, did I?
We marked my cruiser as a command post on the maps.
A command post is a base of operations at the scene.
Yes, sir.
And you parked your cruiser in front of the driveway at 34 Fairview to serve as the command post?
Yes, right side of the driveway, yes, sir.
You were initially facing away from the flagpole when you did that?
Yes, sir.
Which would mean that your cruiser was parked technically on the wrong side of the street facing Cedar Crest because you were against 34 Fairview?
Correct, sir.
And then ultimately turned it around?
Well, yes, myself and Trooper Beausoleil moved our vehicles.
You initially parked there because you wanted to keep the area where you were searching clear of vehicles.
Yes, sir.
And that was where you met at the, we'll call it a command post, where you met to discuss the parameters of the search?
Detective Lieutenant Tully arrived on scene. That's where we spoke.
It was Lieutenant Tully from the Norfolk State Police Detectives Unit who told you where to look and what to look for.
Correct. He told us the area he thought would be the best probability to find what we were looking for.
In addition to your team, 7 of you, you noted that there were 5 other officers on scene at various points.
It was about 5, sir.
They were all in uniform?
They were not.
Some were in plain clothes?
They were.
You didn't know who those 5 other officers were?
I only recognized 2 of them, sir.
The other 3, you didn't know if they were state police or Canton police?
Correct, sir.
At that point, were you made aware that the Canton police had been conflicted out of this investigation?
I had not, no, sir.
Lieutenant Tully directed you to an area where he said that John O'Keefe's body was found.
He directed us to where he believed the vehicle involved had been parked and to where the victim's body was recovered.
All right. So again, in answer to my question, he did direct you to an area where he believed the victim's body was found.
Yes, sir.
And he told you that he believed that the victim officer was hit and dragged by a motor vehicle.
I believe he might have said possibly dragged.
In terms of your paperwork on the case, there's something called a final mission report.
Yes, there is, sir.
And what is the final mission report?
That's just a brief summary of the actions conducted by SERT during our assignment.
With regard to those 5 officers, you mentioned that you recognized 2 of the 5 officers that were in plainclothes at the scene?
Correct, sir.
And what departments were they from?
The only 2 I recognized were from the state police.
Getting back to the final mission report, you called it a brief summary of what you had done with regard to the search.
Yes, sir.
Just because it's brief doesn't mean that it should be inaccurate.
Correct, sir.
It's important with regard to anything that you submit on this case that you be as accurate as possible.
Yes, sir.
And you try to be, correct?
Do our best, sir.
There are 7 different categories on the final mission report. The first being the mission name, which you entered as the Canton Evidence SERT.
Yes, sir.
That was accurate. The evidence SERT occurred, and it occurred in Canton.
Yes, sir.
You also put the date and time of the first call, and you entered that as January 29th of 2022 at 2:32 p.m.
Yes, sir.
And that was accurate because you've testified that's when Lieutenant Tully contacted you.
Yes, sir.
There's a question or a box that says general terrain, and you entered that as neighborhood, snow-covered street, and front lawn.
Correct, sir.
And that was accurate, right?
Yes, sir.
And in terms of incident type, you entered evidence SERT,
Yes, sir.
and that was accurate.
Yes, sir.
There's a final mission report that talks about your mission and starts with 7 SERT members responded to the scene, and it talks about the snow in the area where the victim's body was found, the plows hadn't cleared the street, et cetera, et cetera. That paragraph is accurate as well.
Yes, it is, sir.
And then there's a final mission report by, and it gives your name, Lieutenant Kevin O'Hara, and it has your accurate badge number, which is 3042.
Yes, sir.
All right. Everything that we've just discussed in terms of what you put in your final mission report was entered accurately.
Yes, sir.
The final category is general description of mission. You entered the off-duty officer was hit and dragged by a vehicle at approximately 12:30 a.m.
I don't remember exactly how it's worded.
It's been a recurring theme. Do you need
I do not.
glasses? You
I do
don't?
not,
Okay.
sir.
All right. I'm sorry.
Thank you, sir. All set, sir. Thank you.
Lieutenant, having read that portion of the final mission report, is your memory refreshed?
Yes, it is, sir.
Did you enter in there the off-duty officer was hit and dragged by a vehicle at approximately 12:30 a.m.?
Yes, I did, sir.
All right. Now, with regard to the area that, or I should say, Lieutenant Tully's direction to you to search the area where the victim's body was found, Lieutenant Tully never informed you that he was actually present and saw the victim's body in that spot.
He did not, no, sir.
Did you mark the place where John O'Keefe's body was found with GPS coordinates?
We did not. He wasn't no longer on scene, sir, so I think that would have been not 100% accurate.
You also mentioned that Lieutenant Tully directed you to the area where the SUV had been parked.
To where the vehicle was believed to have been parked, yes, sir.
At that time, did you know it was an SUV or not?
I did not, sir.
Lieutenant Tully didn't tell you that he ever saw the vehicle parked in the area to which he directed you.
He did not say that he saw it there, no, sir.
So Lieutenant Tully told you to look for a man's sneaker.
That was one of the items missing, yes, sir.
And he told you to look for red and clear plastic pieces of taillight.
He just said taillight, didn't say red clear, but taillight pieces.
Did Lieutenant Tully give you approval not just to search outside the house, but also inside the house?
No, we never discussed searching inside the house, sir.
You confirmed that the homeowner was there, right? Because he came out of the house at one point?
I don't know if it was the homeowner, but an adult male exited the house while we were there, sir.
He appeared to live at that home. Let me get some more. That Lieutenant Tully was the one who directed you where to search and what to search.
He gave us the best idea for the search area, yes, sir.
And it was based on his direction that you created a grid and began your search.
He told us where he believed the vehicle was parked and where the victim's body was found, and I decided how far of a distance we would search. Yeah, I based it off of the information he provided.
So the answer is yes.
I guess so, sir.
This was not the first time that you and your team have done a search in this
Not for evidence. We had never done a search like this before, just for missing person searches.
case. You've been trained to search winter crime scenes that have.
Correct, sir.
There are proper techniques for conducting such searches during or after a snow.
Yeah, we have best practices we use.
Best practices would include documenting the scene and the area to be searched with photographs and diagrams.
Yes, sir.
It would also include using, gentle methods to remove.
Yeah, the best way you can, yes, sir.
That might include, smaller hand tools, brushes, gloved hands.
Only if you would have a real small area.
It would include removing snow layer by layer and then sifting it and documenting evidence again for each layer that's removed?
Yeah, I believe that's how we went through, sir. We went slowly, methodically, and sifting through the snow as we progressed down the area. Correct.
And best practices would mean documenting by photographs along the way the progress of your.
That would be up to the detectives or the crime scene unit, sir.
But you were the one who was making those decisions.
Not for documentation purposes. No, that's not our responsibility, sir.
It would be advisable to document your search in that way, would it not?
That would be at the discretion of the detective, sir.
Okay. Would it harm your search in any way to fully document it along the way?
It would not harm it, no, sir.
You want to take your time and work methodically and thoroughly in this.
Correct, sir.
And you want to collect evidence as it's located and immediately photograph it in place before it's disturbed.
Yeah, as evidence is discovered, it will get photographed in place. Yes, sir.
During your search in this case, your team found a sneaker and pieces of red and clear plastic.
Correct, sir.
The evidence that you found was basically on top of each other, within a few inches of each other, correct?
Within a foot or two, a couple feet, yes, sir.
Well, you testified a prior proceeding in this matter, did you not?
I did, sir.
And you were sworn to tell the truth during that prior proceeding.
Yes, sir.
And that testimony was closer in time to the search that you conducted on January 29th than today.
Yes, it was, sir.
And your memory would have been better then than it is.
Probably, sir.
You were asked the question, quote, and as far as the red and clear glass you believed consistent with taillight, was that found in the same area as the sneaker or somewhere else? Do you recall that question?
I believe being asked that question, yes, sir.
And your answer was same area within a few inches, less than a foot.
Correct, sir.
You mapped out GPS coordinates for what you found?
One of the team members did, yes, sir.
Your team did?
Yes, sir.
And Lieutenant Tully from the Norfolk State Police Detective Unit was present during the...
Yes, he was.
And he was the one that was photographing the items that were found?
Yes, he did.
So I'd like to ask you a few questions about your observations about where items were found in relation to each other. Was there a piece of red plastic located on the roadway left of the flagpole when you look at the house from the street?
Left of the flagpole. Yes, sir.
Given your testimony about these items essentially being in the same area less than a foot away from each other, it could not be true then that from that red piece of plastic that was found in the street, that 3 feet south was a black Nike sneaker found under the snow. That couldn't have happened, correct?
Well, I don't know where the distance between the objects as far as the mapping purposes, sir, but as far as how far apart, the first thing we discovered was one red piece of plastic, and then further south, that's when we found the sneaker and additional pieces.
Again, they were all in the same area, less than a foot apart, correct?
The same general area, but could have been over a foot, sir. I'd have to measure between the GPS markings.
Okay, so what you testified to in that prior proceeding, where everything was less than a foot apart, that wasn't accurate?
Best recollection that they were within around a foot, but to be 100% accurate, you would have to measure between the two GPS points, which I have not done.
If your estimate is you didn't even say a foot, you said less than a foot.
I believe that's what you read, around a foot, yes, sir.
Which is what you testified.
Correct, sir.
If it's less than a foot, then by definition, the sneaker couldn't have been found 3 feet south of where that red piece of plastic.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's accurate, sir.
You don't know what's accurate.
Well, you're saying 3 feet. I don't know if that's accurate, sir.
No, that's what I'm asking you. Is it accurate?
I don't know, sir. I'm not sure the exact distance. I didn't measure the GPS markings, sir. I'm not.
All right.
I don't know. I didn't know where you came up with that number 3 feet, sir.
I'm just asking questions. Well, I'm just asking questions. All right. So, with regard to, let's assume for a moment that the sneaker was found 3 feet south of that first red piece of plastic. From your observations, was there a clear piece of plastic that was found a few feet south of that black sneaker?
There was a piece of plastic found just past the sneaker.
A few feet south of the sneaker?
I don't know where you're getting that from, sir.
Again, you don't have to worry where my questions are coming
So,
from.
Mr. Yannetti, no comments. Next
Sure.
question.
I'm just asking a factual question. You were there. I was not.
Mr. Yannetti, just ask the question.
Yes. Was a clear piece of plastic found a few feet south of the black sneaker, which was found 3 feet south of the red piece of plastic? Did that happen?
I don't know the distance, sir. No, not without measuring it, but I wouldn't think it was that far of a distance. They were much closer than that.
Right. I mean, you say you don't know the distance, but you testified to what the distance was in that prior proceeding, did you not?
Objection.
Next question.
All right. And then moving along, we have the red piece of plastic, 3 feet south, black sneaker, a few feet south, clear plastic. Then finally, several feet south of that clear piece of plastic, was there a second piece of red plastic found? Several feet south.
No, again, I don't agree with your description of the distance.
All right. So we will agree that one piece of red plastic, 3 feet south sneaker, a few feet south clear piece of plastic, and then several feet south more red plastic. That didn't happen.
I don't agree on those distances, no, sir.
No. You testified that these items were buried under some snow.
Correct, sir. They were under snow.
You testified on direct examination that you collected 6 or 7 pieces of the plastic.
I believe that's what we found, yes, sir.
Would you agree that it's important to be precise in your investigation and your search?
Yes, why Lieutenant Tully took an evidence log, sir.
Can you tell the jury whether it was 6 or 7 of the pieces of plastic that you actually found?
I've never seen the evidence log from that night, sir. I'm not sure exactly how many he recovered. Again, I was partaking in the search, so I'm not sure what the exact number is, sir.
You would agree with me that you only mapped 3 of them on the map that was introduced here?
Correct.
Again, that was because the pieces were essentially on top of each other.
Correct. As you would mark them on the GPS, they were marking almost directly on top of each other, and we knew that was going to...
They certainly were not being marked feet away from each other, several feet.
No, sir.
You are aware that Lieutenant Tully photographed 5 pieces of plastic that day, are you not?
I'm not sure. I'd never seen the photos until probably about a week ago.
You did say to the State Police Detective Unit at the end of this search that if they wanted you and your team to come back out during daylight hours, you would.
Correct, sir.
So I'd like to direct your attention to 6 specific dates, and then I'll ask you a question. February 3rd, February 4th, February 8th, February 10th, February 11th, and February 18th. Those 6 dates. And my question is, did the lead investigator, Trooper Michael Proctor, ever call you on one of those 6 dates to come back to the scene to conduct a further search?
No, he did not.
I have nothing further.
Okay. Redirect, Mr. Lally.
With respect to both yourself and Lieutenant Tully as being dispatched, that decision comes from above both of your heads with respect to each of your units.
That's correct, sir.
You were asked some questions about a daily journal. Can you describe for the jury sort of what that is or what kind of information would get kept in that?
It would just be our day-to-day activities. We'll give a quick gist of what we're doing each day. Be more general than that doesn't get too thorough.
You had made mention during your testimony some other documentation that would be more specific.
Sure.
And what would some of those be and how would that be more specific?
That's a report that gets generated through our mission manager software, so it creates a little bit more detailed response.
And are you familiar with an AVL?
I am, yes, sir.
And what is an AVL?
It's the Geotab GPS on the cruiser's automatic vehicle locator system.
And the vehicle that you were operating that day, was that equipped with an AVL?
Yes, it was, sir.
And is that how you're able to tell the precise time of your arrival on scene,
Correct, sir.
as well as each member of your unit? Is that correct?
Correct, sir.
As far as the items and where they were, photographs that were marked as exhibits, when they were located by members of your team, they were photographed as they lay. Is that correct?
Correct, sir. As they were discovered, they were photographed.
So regardless of inches versus feet versus whatever distance it was, you didn't measure that. Is that correct?
We did not.
Where they were actually discovered or where they were recovered, they were photographed where they were, correct?
Correct, sir.
Nothing further.